The warning lights flickered across the command deck of Imperial Station Vigilance like dying stars. Fleet Admiral Thexer stood before the massive viewing screen, his forearms clasped behind his broad back, watching the data streams with growing irritation. For 3,000 years, the Zephyron Imperium had ruled the galaxy with absolute authority. Nothing happened in Imperial space without their knowledge. Nothing moved without their permission. Until today. "Admiral, the sensor anomalies are spreading," reported sensor technician Lyra from her station below. Her voice carried a tremor that Thexer found distasteful. The young officer had only served for 20 cycles, barely old enough to understand the weight of Imperial power. "We now have disruptions in 6 sectors simultaneously." Thexer's mandibles clicked in annoyance. "Technical malfunctions. The sensor arrays are old in the outer territories. Schedule maintenance crews and stop bothering me with minor issues." But Lyra didn't back down. She pressed several controls, and the main display changed to show a galactic map. Red dots blinked across multiple systems, each one representing a sensor blackout or unexplained energy signature. "Sir, with respect, these aren't random failures. The pattern is too coordinated. Something is interfering with our detection systems." "Coordinated?" Thexer turned to face her fully, his height of nearly 3 meters casting a shadow across her station. "By whom?" "The Krell pirates are barely capable of flying their stolen ships. The Vex Collective hasn't left their territories in 2 centuries. Who exactly do you imagine is capable of blinding Imperial sensors across 6 sectors?" Lyra hesitated, then spoke quietly. The command deck fell silent. Several officers looked up from their stations. One of them, Commander Vexel, let out a barking laugh. "The humans? Those primitive creatures barely understand faster-than-light travel. They huddle in their pathetic colonies in the outer rim, playing with technology they stole from crashed Imperial survey ships." Thexer's expression darkened. The humans had been a minor annoyance for the past 40 years. When Imperial expansion had reached their small cluster of worlds, the creatures had protested, claiming the territory as theirs. The Imperium had responded as they always did with inferior species. They had taken what they wanted. Several human colonies had been destroyed as examples. The survivors had retreated to the furthest edges of explored space. Since then, there had been small skirmishes, human raiders attacking supply convoys, human ships harassing mining operations. Nothing that threatened Imperial power. Merely the desperate struggles of a dying species refusing to accept their place in the natural order. "The humans are irrelevant," Thexer declared. "Focus on actual threats. These sensor disruptions are likely caused by solar activity or equipment degradation." 3 hours later, Patrol Squadron 17 failed to report in. Thexer was reviewing supply manifests when the communications officer interrupted. "Admiral, we've lost contact with Squadron 17. They were investigating one of the anomalies in the Outer Reach sector." "Lost contact?" Thexer set down his data tablet. "Define lost contact." "Complete communications blackout, sir. Their transponder signals vanished approximately 20 minutes ago. We dispatched a recovery team, but they found nothing. No debris, no distress beacons, no energy signatures. It's as if the entire squadron simply ceased to exist." Squadron 17 consisted of 12 warships and over 3,000 personnel. Ships that size didn't simply disappear. Thexer felt the first stirring of genuine concern. "Send 2 full squadrons to investigate. I want every scanner operating at maximum range. If there's so much as a piece of hull plating floating out there, I want it found." The investigation teams found nothing. No wreckage, no bodies, no evidence that Squadron 17 had ever been in that sector at all. The only clue was a single sensor reading recorded just before the squadron vanished. A brief spike of energy that matched no known technology in Imperial databases. Over the next 4 days, 3 more squadrons disappeared. Grand Imperator Thun arrived at Station Vigilance aboard his personal flagship, the Eternal Dominion. Thexer met him in the station's central command chamber, a vast room dominated by holographic displays showing the entire Imperial territory. The Imperator was old even by Zephyron standards. His scales had faded from deep purple to pale lavender, and he moved with the careful deliberation of someone who had witnessed centuries of history. "Show me," Stun commanded without preamble. Thexer activated the tactical display. Red zones marked the areas where squadrons had vanished. Yellow indicators showed the locations of unexplained sensor disruptions. Green dots represented the positioning of Imperial fleets now pulled back into defensive formations around key systems. "We've lost contact with 48 ships in total," Thexer reported. "No survivors, no wreckage, no explanation. The pattern suggests a coordinated attack, but we have no evidence of enemy action. Our ships simply vanish." Stun studied the map for a long moment. "You believe the humans are responsible?" It wasn't a question. Thexer chose his words carefully. "I believe we may have underestimated them. Imperator intelligence reports from the past year suggest the humans have been developing new technologies. Their raids have become more sophisticated. They've been avoiding our patrols with unusual success." "Avoiding patrols is one matter," Stun said. "Making entire squadrons disappear without a trace is another. The humans have fewer than 100 capital ships, according to our last assessment. Even if every single one of them attacked simultaneously, they couldn't threaten Imperial power. Perhaps our assessments were incorrect." Stun turned away from the display. "Increase patrols in all sectors. Deploy listening posts along the frontier. If the humans are responsible, find them and destroy them. The galaxy must understand that the Imperium cannot be challenged." Thexer saluted, but as the Imperator departed, he felt a cold certainty settling in his chest. They were missing something crucial. The humans weren't behaving like a desperate, dying species. They were behaving like hunters. Lyra approached his command platform later that evening, when most of the day shift had departed. "Admiral, I need to show you something. I've been analyzing the sensor data from the disappearances." Thexer gestured for her to continue. "The energy spikes that appeared just before each vanishing, I ran them through the database multiple times. They don't match any known FTL signature, but there's a pattern. The spikes occur in pairs, milliseconds apart. I think we're seeing arrival and departure signatures for the same ships." "Impossible," Thexer said. "No known technology allows for that kind of transition speed." "No known Imperial technology," Lyra corrected quietly. "But what if the humans developed something new? What if they've found a way to move between points in space without using conventional faster-than-light drives?" Thexer stared at her. The implications were staggering. FTL travel required ships to enter hyperspace, travel along established corridors, then exit back into normal space. The process took time, hours or even days depending on the distance. Ships in hyperspace could be detected, tracked, and intercepted. The entire Imperial defense strategy relied on controlling those hyperspace corridors. If the humans could bypass that system entirely, moving instantly from one location to another, then every defensive position, every fortification, every strategic calculation became worthless. "Show me the data." Lyra brought up her analysis. The pattern was clear once you knew what to look for. Brief flashes of exotic energy appearing seemingly at random throughout Imperial space. Pairs of signatures, arrival and departure, separated by minutes or hours. And every location corresponded to either a missing patrol or a sensor disruption. "They've been watching us," Thexer realized. "These aren't attacks. These are reconnaissance missions. The humans have been moving through our territory freely, observing our fleet positions, our defense patterns, everything." "For how long?" Lyra highlighted older sensor logs going back months. "The signatures appear as far back as our archives go. We dismissed them as sensor ghosts or cosmic background radiation. But if I'm right, the humans have been scouting Imperial space for at least a year, maybe longer." Thexer felt his confidence crack. For decades, the Imperium had viewed humans as primitive scavengers playing with stolen technology. But what if the truth was different? What if humans had been carefully studying their enemy, learning every weakness, preparing for something larger? "We need to inform the Imperator immediately." Before Lyra could respond, The alarm klaxons sounded throughout the station. Communication channels erupted with panicked reports from across the sector. Thexer pulled up the tactical display and felt his blood run cold. 40 systems were reporting the same thing. Imperial defensive platforms were going offline, not from attacks but from systematic shutdowns. Someone had infiltrated their networks, inserting code that disabled weapons, shields, and communications simultaneously. And then they appeared. Not dozens of ships. Not hundreds, but thousands of new contacts materializing on sensors across 50 different systems. The humans hadn't been hiding in the outer rim, nursing their wounds and planning desperate raids. They had been building a fleet. The command deck of Station Vigilance descended into controlled chaos. Officers shouted reports, trying to make sense of the tactical situation. The holographic display showed human warships appearing throughout Imperial space, their positions carefully calculated to strike at supply depots, repair facilities, and communication hubs. "Get me a count," Thexer demanded, his voice cutting through the noise. "How many ships are we facing?" The tactical officer's hands trembled as he worked his console. "Admiral, I'm reading at least 2,000 contacts, maybe more. They're using some kind of stealth technology. Ships are appearing and disappearing faster than we can track them. 2,000 ships. The humans supposedly had fewer than 100 capital vessels. Either Imperial intelligence had failed catastrophically, or the humans had been building their fleet in complete secrecy for years. A priority communication came through from Imperial Central Command. Stun's face appeared on the screen, his expression grave. "All fleet commanders, this is Grand Imperator Stun. We are now at full war status. The human species has launched a coordinated assault across Imperial space. All military forces are to engage and destroy human vessels on sight. This is no longer a border skirmish. This is total war." Thexer acknowledged the order and began organizing his forces. But as he watched human ships systematically dismantling Imperial defenses with terrifying efficiency, he couldn't shake a single horrifying thought. The humans had been planning this for a very long time, and the Imperium, in its arrogance, had given them all the time they needed. Fleet Admiral Thexer stood on the bridge of his flagship, Righteous Vengeance, watching the forge worlds of Hector Prime grow larger on the view screen. The system was vital to Imperial military production, housing 3 massive orbital foundries that produced everything from hull plating to weapon systems. If the humans truly intended to wage war against the Imperium, they would need to capture or destroy facilities like Hector Prime, which was exactly why Thexer had brought the Third Fleet here. 300 warships, including 12 dreadnoughts, protected by thousands of automated defense platforms. The humans would be fools to attack such a fortified position. "Estimated arrival in 2 hours," reported his navigation officer. "The system defense grid reports all platforms are online and ready." Thexer nodded, but something felt wrong. The journey from Station Vigilance had taken 4 days through hyperspace. During that time, reports from across Imperial space painted a disturbing picture. Human ships were everywhere and nowhere, appearing without warning, striking targets with precision, then vanishing before Imperial forces could respond. Yesterday, an entire supply convoy had been destroyed near the Keyless Nebula. The escorts reported the attackers appeared from nothing, destroyed 18 cargo ships in under 10 minutes, then disappeared. Total Imperial losses, 43 ships. Total human losses, 0. The communication officer interrupted his thoughts. "Admiral, we're receiving a transmission from Hector Prime Defense Command. They're asking for our authorization codes." "Send them." There was a pause. Then the officer spoke again, his voice uncertain. "Sir, they're not responding. The channel is still open, but no one is answering. Try again." "I am, sir. The connection is active, but there's only silence on the other end." Thexer felt his skin prickle. "Tactical, scan the system. Full sensor sweep. I want to know what's happening before we get any closer." The tactical officer worked his console, then froze. His face went pale. "Admiral, I'm detecting multiple human ships in the system. They're holding position around the orbital foundries." "How many?" 73 capital ships, sir. and all 3 foundries show human transponder codes. They've taken the system. The bridge fell silent. Taking Hector Prime should have been impossible. The system had 30,000 personnel, automated defenses, and a permanent garrison of 48 warships. Even if the humans had attacked in overwhelming numbers, there should have been time for a distress call, a warning, something. When did this happen? Thexer demanded. When did the attack begin? The tactical officer checked his readings. That's just it, sir. There are no signs of an attack. No debris fields, no damaged stations, no evidence of weapons fire. The defense platforms are intact but offline. The garrison ships are in their docking bays, powered down. It's like everyone just stopped fighting. Get me visual confirmation. I want to see those foundries. The main view screen shifted to show the first orbital foundry. The massive structure hung in space, its lights blinking normally, but human warships surrounded it in a defensive formation. And there, transmitted openly on standard frequencies, was a message repeating on a loop. A human appeared on the screen. She was female, shorter and less physically imposing than a Zephron, but something about her presence commanded attention. Her hair was dark, pulled back tightly, and her eyes were the color of Earth's oceans. She wore a military uniform marked with unfamiliar symbols. Thexer didn't recognize. "I am Commander Sarah Chan of the United Human Fleet," she said calmly. "Hector Prime is now under human control. Imperial forces stationed here have been disarmed, but not harmed. Your defense grid has been disabled. Your communication networks are being monitored. You have 2 options. Withdraw immediately or be destroyed. You have 1 hour to decide." The message looped back to the beginning and played again. Commander Vexel, Thexer's second-in-command, let out a snarl. "This is an insult. 1 human dares to threaten the 3rd Fleet? We should destroy every ship in that system and reclaim what belongs to the Imperium." Thexer held up a hand for silence. His mind raced, analyzing the situation. 73 human ships against his 300. The numbers favored the Imperium 3-1, but those same numbers had favored Imperial forces in a dozen other encounters over the past week, and every single one had ended in catastrophic Imperial losses. "Tactical analysis," he ordered. "If we engage, what are our chances?" The tactical officer worked quickly. Based on previous encounters with human vessels, their weapons have longer range and greater accuracy than ours. Their ships are faster and more maneuverable. In a direct engagement, our numerical superiority should give us the advantage, but casualties would be significant. Estimated losses: 40 to 60% of our fleet. 40 to 60%. That meant losing up to 180 ships to reclaim a single system, and that assumed the humans didn't have reinforcements waiting to jump in. "How did they take this system without anyone noticing?" Vexel asked. Lyra, now transferred to Thexer's flagship at his request, spoke from her station. She had proven her worth at station vigilance, and he wanted her analytical skills close at hand. "Sir, I've been reviewing the sensor logs from Hector Prime's defense network. They're still broadcasting, which means I can access their historical data." "What do you see?" "Nothing, sir. That's the problem. There's no record of any attack. But 3 weeks ago, several defense platforms went offline for scheduled maintenance. Except there was no maintenance scheduled. Someone inserted false orders into the system. 3 weeks. The humans had infiltrated Hector Prime while the Imperium was still dismissing them as a minor threat." Lyra continued, "The platforms came back online with their original software, or so it appeared. But I'm detecting anomalies in their operating protocols. I think the humans installed backdoors into the system. Hidden access points that let them shut everything down remotely when they were ready." "What about the garrison?" Thexer asked. 48 ships and 30,000 personnel don't just surrender without a fight." "No, sir. But they do surrender when they wake up one morning to find every weapon system disabled, every communication channel jammed, and 70 human warships holding position around their station with enough firepower to crack the installation open like an egg." The picture became clear. The humans hadn't attacked Hector Prime in a traditional sense. They had infiltrated it, subverted its defenses, and then simply appeared in overwhelming numbers. By the time the Imperial garrison realized what was happening, resistance was already futile. Thexer had spent 3 centuries as a military officer. He had fought in campaigns against the Krell pirates, the Vex Collective, and a dozen other species. He understood tactics, strategy, and the application of military force. But this was something different. This was warfare fought in the shadows, where the battle was won before the first shot was ever fired. "Open a channel to Commander Chun," he ordered. The human's face appeared on his screen. She was younger than he had expected, probably no more than 40 or 50 cycles by human standards, but her eyes held the weight of command. "Fleet Admiral Thexer of the Third Fleet," he announced. "I am authorized to negotiate on behalf of the Zephron Imperium." "There's nothing to negotiate," Chun replied calmly. "Withdraw your fleet or we will destroy it. Those are the only terms. You're outnumbered 3-1. Even with your technological advantages, you cannot win against the full weight of the Third Fleet." Chun smiled, and it was not a friendly expression. "Admiral, let me save us both some time. You're right that we're outnumbered. You're wrong that you can win. Your ships are predictable. You follow doctrine written centuries ago, designed for fighting enemies who play by Imperial rules. We don't play by your rules." Bold words from someone commanding a smaller force. Not bold. Honest. "Tell me, Admiral, have you reviewed the combat reports from the past week? How many times have your forces successfully engaged human ships? And of those engagements, how many resulted in Imperial victories?" Thexer's mandibles clenched. The answer was humiliating. 0. Not a single confirmed kill of a human capital ship. The only human losses had been a handful of smaller support vessels sacrificed as decoys. "You're thinking this is different," Chun continued. "You have 300 ships in formation. We can't possibly hit and run against numbers like that. You're wrong. We won't hit and run. We'll simply hit." She made a gesture off-screen, and suddenly the tactical display on Righteous Vengeance lit up with new contacts. Human ships were appearing throughout the Third Fleet formation, not in front of them but among them, positioned at point-blank range between Imperial vessels. "What you're seeing is a simulation," Chun explained. "This is what will happen if you attack. My ships will skip-jump directly into your formation. From that range, your large vessels can't maneuver effectively. You'll be shooting at each other trying to hit us. We, meanwhile, will target your command ships and ammunition storage. The battle will last approximately 30 minutes. Your losses will be total." The simulation played out on Thexer's screen. It was horrifying in its efficiency. Human ships appeared, fired devastating barrages at close range, then vanished before return fire could strike them. Imperial ships, trying to target the humans, ended up hitting each other. The formation collapsed into chaos. When the simulation ended, every single Imperial vessel was either destroyed or crippled. "Of course," Chun said. "That's just one possibility. You could also withdraw. Your ships and crews would survive. You could fight another day. The choice is yours, Admiral. But you have 58 minutes left to decide." The channel closed. Vexel exploded in fury. "She's bluffing. No technology allows for that kind of precision jumping. And even if it did, the energy requirements would be astronomical. Their ships would burn out their drives attempting it." But Lyra shook her head. "Sir, I've been analyzing their jump signatures. They're not using conventional FTL drives. It's something completely different. Whatever technology they've developed, it doesn't follow our understanding of hyperspace mechanics. I think they can do exactly what Commander Chun just threatened." Thexer looked around his bridge. He saw fear in the faces of officers who had never known defeat. The Imperium had ruled for so long, dominated so completely, that the very concept of losing was alien to them. But Thexer was old enough to remember the lessons history taught. Every empire fell eventually. Every dominant power was surpassed in time. The question was whether you recognized that shift when it came, or fought blindly until nothing remained. "Helm," he said quietly. "Plot a course out of the system. We're withdrawing." Vexel stared at him in shock. "Admiral, you cannot be serious. We are the Third Fleet. We do not retreat from inferior forces." "We are not retreating," Thexer said firmly. "We are making a tactical withdrawal. There is a difference. I will not sacrifice 300 ships and 60,000 personnel for pride." He opened a channel to the rest of the fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Thexer. We are withdrawing from Hector Prime. Maintain formation and prepare for hyperspace transition on my mark." Protests from other commanders came immediately, but Thexer cut them off. "This is not a debate. We have been outmaneuvered. The humans control this system, and we do not have the resources to reclaim it without unacceptable losses. We will report to Grand Imperator Thun and request reinforcements. Until then, we withdraw." As the Third Fleet turned away from Hector Prime and began the jump to hyperspace, Thexer watched the human ships on his tactical display. They didn't pursue. They didn't taunt. They simply held their positions, professional and disciplined. These were not the desperate raiders he had been fighting. These were trained military professionals executing a carefully planned campaign. And somehow, the Imperium had missed the moment when humanity transformed from scattered colonists into a legitimate military power. The jump to hyperspace engaged, and Hector Prime vanished from view. But Thexer knew the image of Commander Sarah Chun would stay with him for a long time, not because of her threats, but because of the quiet confidence in her eyes. She had known he would withdraw. She had counted on it. The humans weren't just winning battles. They were winning the war before the Imperium even realized it had truly begun. The Imperial throne world of Zephyros Prime gleamed like a jewel in the void. Massive cities covered 3 continents, connected by orbital elevators that reached into space. Millions of ships came and went every day, carrying goods and passengers across an empire that spanned 800 star systems. For 3,000 years, this world had been the center of galactic civilization. Today it was afraid. Grand Imperator Thun sat in the War Council chamber, surrounded by holographic displays showing the rapidly deteriorating military situation. In the 3 weeks since Hector Prime had fallen, humans had captured or destroyed Imperial assets in 47 systems. Entire fleets had been ambushed and annihilated. Supply lines had been severed. Communication networks were compromised. The worst part wasn't the losses themselves. It was the fear. Imperial citizens who had lived their entire lives in absolute security now questioned whether the Imperium could protect them. Worlds were requesting additional garrison forces that simply didn't exist. Merchant ships refused to travel without military escorts. The economy was beginning to strain under the weight of a war that seemed impossible to fight. "How many ships do we have left?" Thun asked his military advisors. High Commander Krelith reviewed his data. "Approximately 7,000 capital ships remain operational across all fleets, Imperator. However, many are scattered throughout our territory. Consolidating them would take weeks." "And what are the humans doing while we consolidate?" Krelith's expression darkened. "They continue their attacks. Yesterday, they destroyed the supply depot at Marlin Station. 3 days ago, they captured the repair facilities at Telos 7. They move faster than we can respond, striking where we're weakest and avoiding direct confrontation with our larger forces." Fleet Admiral Thexer, who had been summoned to the throne world after the retreat from Hector Prime, cleared his throat. "Imperator, if I may speak plainly." "Please do. Plain speech is rare in this chamber these days. We are fighting this war incorrectly. We deploy our forces to static defensive positions, protecting assets the humans have already mapped and planned to attack. Meanwhile, they move freely through our territory using technology we don't understand. We cannot win by defending everything. We must force them to come to us on our terms." Thun leaned forward. "Explain." Thexer activated a star map. A single system appeared, highlighted in gold. The Nexus Gate. It is the only hyperspace corridor connecting the outer territories to the Imperial core. Every ship traveling between the frontier and Zephyros Prime must pass through this system. If the humans want to threaten our core worlds, they have to come through the Nexus Gate. "And you propose we fortify it." "Not just fortify it, Imperator. I propose we turn it into the most heavily defended position in galactic history. We pull back every available ship from the outer territories. We concentrate our full military might at this single point. The humans have shown they excel at hit-and-run tactics against spread-out forces. Let's see how they fare against a concentrated defense they cannot avoid. High Commander Krelith studied the map. It's a sound strategy, but it means abandoning the outer territories completely. Hundreds of worlds will be left defenseless. Those worlds are already lost, Thexer said bluntly. The humans control the space lanes. They dictate where and when battles occur. If we spread our forces thin trying to defend everything, we'll lose everything. But if we concentrate at the Nexus Gate, we can create a choke point the humans cannot bypass. Stun considered this. The political cost of abandoning so much territory would be enormous. But Thexer was right about one thing: the current strategy wasn't working. Something had to change. Very well. Issue the orders. All fleets are to withdraw to the Nexus Gate. We make our stand there. He paused, then added, and activate the Dreadstar fleet. The room went silent. The Dreadstar fleet consisted of 12 ancient warships, massive vessels built during the Imperial Expansion Wars 5 centuries ago. Each ship was over 10 kilometers long, bristling with weapons that could crack planets. They were so powerful and so resource-intensive to operate that they had been mothballed after the wars ended. The Imperium had never needed them again. Until now. It will take weeks to bring them back online, Krelith warned. The crews will need training. The systems will need testing. Then start immediately. I want those ships operational and ready for battle. The humans have shown us they are a serious threat. It's time we show them what the full might of the Imperium looks like. The orders went out that very day. Across Imperial space, fleet commanders received their instructions. Abandon the outer territories, withdraw all forces to the Nexus Gate, and prepare for the battle that would decide the war. Aboard Righteous Vengeance, Thexer watched the fleet assemble. Ships arrived in a steady stream, emerging from hyperspace and taking up positions around the massive gate structure. Within 2 weeks, over 8,000 Imperial warships had gathered in a single system, the largest concentration of military power the galaxy had seen in centuries. The Nexus Gate itself was a marvel of engineering. The structure was artificial, a massive ring of exotic matter that stabilized the hyperspace corridor running through it. Without the gate, ships would have to travel months along the long route to reach the core worlds. With it, the journey took days. It was the perfect bottleneck. Thexer stood on his bridge, watching defensive platforms being deployed around the gate. Minefields filled the surrounding space in carefully planned patterns. Energy screens created overlapping fields of fire. Long-range missile batteries locked into position. If the humans wanted to push through to the core worlds, they would have to fight their way through this. Lyra approached with her usual hesitant manner. Admiral, I've completed my analysis of human tactics and strategy. They're following principles from Earth's military history. I've been studying their archived records from before they achieved spaceflight. Humans spent thousands of years fighting each other, developing increasingly sophisticated methods of warfare. What we're seeing now, the mobility, the deception, the targeting of supply lines instead of enemy forces, these are all strategies humans used against each other for millennia. Thexer found that deeply unsettling. The Imperium had achieved dominance relatively early in its history. After conquering their home system, they had expanded into a galaxy where most other species were at similar or lower levels of development. There had been wars, certainly, but nothing like what Lyra was describing. You're saying humans are better at war than we are because they've had more practice? Not just practice, sir, evolution. Human societies that were bad at warfare were conquered by those that were good at it. Over thousands of years, they refined the art of conflict to a degree that other species never needed to. When they reached space, they brought all that knowledge with them. Then how do we fight them? Lyra hesitated. Honestly, sir, I don't know. Every time we think we understand their tactics, they demonstrate something new. They adapt faster than we can respond. But if your plan works, if we can force them into a conventional battle at the Nexus Gate, their advantages become less significant. In a straight fight with overwhelming numbers, physics still matters. 3 days later, the Dreadstar fleet arrived. Thexer had seen many impressive ships in his career, but nothing prepared him for the sight of the Dreadstars. The lead ship, Invincible Fury, was a moving fortress. Its hull was thick enough to shrug off weapons that would vaporize smaller vessels. Its weapons could fire across system distances with devastating accuracy. And there were 12 of them. Fleet commanders gathered for a briefing aboard Invincible Fury. Grand Imperator Thun attended via holographic link. "Commanders, the situation is clear," Thun began. "The humans have been raiding our territory for weeks, but they've avoided large-scale engagements. Our intelligence suggests they have fewer than 200 capital ships total. Here at the Nexus Gate we have 8,000 ships, including 12 Dreadstars. The humans cannot bypass this position if they want to threaten our core worlds. When they come, we will destroy them utterly." Commander Relix of the Fifth Fleet raised a question. "Imperator, what if they don't come? What if they continue their raiding strategy? Then they accomplish nothing of strategic importance. They can harass the outer territories, but they cannot win the war without capturing core worlds. And they cannot reach those worlds without going through us. Eventually, they will come." The briefing concluded, and the fleet settled into waiting. Days passed, then weeks. Long-range scouts reported human activity throughout the abandoned territories. They were establishing bases, fortifying positions, building infrastructure. But they made no move toward the Nexus Gate. Thexer began to wonder if the humans would avoid the confrontation entirely. Perhaps they were content to control the frontier while the Imperium held its core, a partition of territory rather than total war. Then, on the 31st day of the blockade, the scouts reported something that changed everything. "Admiral, we have incoming ships," the sensor officer reported. "Human vessels emerging from hyperspace at the outer edge of the system." "How many?" 147 capital ships, sir. They're maintaining formation and advancing directly toward the Nexus Gate. Thexer felt a surge of anticipation. Finally, the humans were committing to a decisive battle. Battle stations. All ships prepare for combat. This is what we've been waiting for. Across the massive Imperial fleet, ships powered up weapons and shields. Crews moved to combat positions. The Dreadstars activated their main guns, weapon systems that required enormous power to operate. The human fleet continued its approach, maintaining formation, making no attempt to hide or maneuver. They were coming straight at the Imperial position, as if they intended to smash through by sheer force. It made no sense. Lyra studied her sensors with growing confusion. "Sir, their approach vector is all wrong. They're coming in directly on our strongest defensive axis. It's suicide." "Maybe they're desperate," suggested Commander Vexel. "Maybe they finally realize they can't win by running and hiding." But Thexer wasn't convinced. Commander Chun hadn't struck him as someone who made desperate decisions. Everything the humans had done so far had been carefully calculated. The human fleet entered weapons range. Then a transmission came through on all frequencies. Commander Chun appeared on screens throughout the Imperial fleet. "Imperial forces, this is Commander Chun of the United Human Fleet. You are blockading a critical travel corridor and threatening the free movement of ships throughout this region. We are here to remove that blockade. This is your final opportunity to withdraw. Stand down or be destroyed." The audacity of the statement was breathtaking. 147 ships were demanding that 8,000 withdraw. Stun's response came through on the command channel. The battle was about to begin. Thexer gripped his command rail, watching the tactical display. The humans were outnumbered 50-1. Even with their technological advantages, the numbers should have been overwhelming. Should have been. But as the range closed and the first weapons fired, Thexer couldn't shake the feeling that they were missing something crucial. Commander Chen's expression had been too calm. "Admiral," Lyra said urgently, "I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the human ships. Their skip drives are charging." "All of them?" "Yes, sir. Simultaneously." Thexer's blood ran cold. He suddenly understood. The human fleet advancing on the Nexus Gate wasn't trying to break through the blockade. They were bait. "All ships, emergency evasive," he started to say. But it was already too late. Across the Imperial formation, space began to tear open as hundreds of human ships, materialized directly inside the defensive perimeter. Not the 147 ships they had been tracking. Hundreds more ships appeared from nowhere, positioned perfectly to strike at command vessels, ammunition depots, and power generators. The humans had never planned to fight their way through the blockade. They planned to fight from inside it. As weapons fire filled the space around the Nexus Gate, Thexer realized the Imperium had fallen into exactly the trap the humans had designed. The battle began with chaos. Human warships materialized in the heart of the Imperial formation, appearing in the gaps between ships where defensive fire couldn't reach them without risking friendly casualties. They were everywhere at once, and the carefully planned Imperial defense turned into a nightmare of confusion. On the bridge of righteous vengeance, alarms screamed as Thexer tried to make sense of the tactical situation. His carefully organized fleet was suddenly scattered across the system, with human ships appearing and disappearing faster than his sensors could track. "Weapons report!" he shouted over the noise. "We can't get a target lock, sir. They're moving too fast. Every time we acquire a target, they jump before we can fire. Then switch to area saturation fire. Fill the space with enough energy that they can't avoid it." The order went out across the fleet, and Imperial ships began firing in broad patterns, hoping to catch human vessels in the crossfire. But the humans had planned for that too. They appeared, fired devastating railgun rounds that punched through Imperial shields, then vanished before return fire could reach them. Lyra's voice cut through the chaos. "Admiral, they're not targeting us randomly. They're hitting specific ships." Thexer checked his tactical display and felt his stomach drop. She was right. The humans were systematically destroying every ship responsible for coordinating Imperial fleet movements, communication nodes, command frigates, even the fleet coordination centers on the larger dreadnoughts. All were being eliminated with surgical precision. "How do they know which ships to target?" demanded Vexel. "They've been watching us for months," Thexer replied grimly. "They know our fleet structure, our communication protocols, everything. They planned this down to the smallest detail." A brilliant flash lit up the view screen. The Imperial carrier Eternal Watch, which housed a regional communication hub, erupted in a ball of fire. Human ships had appeared around it simultaneously, all firing at once, overwhelming its shields in seconds. "Sir, the Fifth Fleet is reporting massive casualties," the communications officer said. "They've lost 17 ships in the last 3 minutes. Commander Relix is requesting permission to withdraw." "Denied. All ships maintain positions. Do not let them break our formation." But the formation was already broken. The carefully arranged defensive lines that had taken weeks to establish were collapsing as captains tried to maneuver away from human ships that appeared without warning. Some Imperial vessels were firing on each other by accident, their targeting systems confused by ships appearing in impossible positions. Aboard the Dreadstar Invincible Fury, Grand Imperator Thun watched the battle unfold with growing horror. The 12 Dreadstars were supposed to be invincible, but they were too slow, too massive to respond to the lightning-fast human attacks. Human ships would appear, target specific systems on the Dreadstars, shield generators, sensor arrays, engine clusters, then vanish before the massive weapons could be brought to bear. "Focus all defensive fire on the immediate area around this ship," Thun ordered. "Create a wall of energy that nothing can penetrate." The Dreadstar's defensive batteries opened up, filling the surrounding space with continuous streams of energy. For a moment, it seemed to work. The area around Invincible Fury became a death zone no ship could survive passing through. Then 3 human ships appeared inside the defensive perimeter, materializing in the small blind zone directly against the Dreadstar's hull, where its own weapons couldn't target them. They fired magnetic mines that clamped onto the hull, then jumped away. "What are those?" Thun demanded. "Unknown, Imperator. They appear to be some kind of shaped charges. They're burning through the hull." The mines detonated simultaneously, sending focused streams of plasma cutting deep into the Dreadstar's structure. The beams were narrow and precise, drilling into the ship's interior. Within seconds, they reached the primary power conduit feeding the main weapons. Invincible Fury's lights flickered and then died. Emergency power came online, but the massive weapons were offline. The ship was still intact, its armor unbroken, but it was effectively dead in space. The same tactic was being repeated across all 12 Dreadstars. Human ships appeared, placed charges, and jumped away. Within 10 minutes, every single one of the ancient warships had been neutralized without being destroyed. Thexer watched in disbelief as the symbols representing the Dreadstars turned yellow on his tactical display. Damaged, but not destroyed. The humans weren't even trying to destroy them. They were removing them from the battle as efficiently as possible. They're treating this like a surgical operation, Lyra said in awe. They're not wasting ammunition destroying ships they can disable. They're maximizing the impact of every shot. A priority transmission came through from one of the outer defense zones. Admiral, this is Commander Krell of the 7th Fleet. We're being destroyed. Request immediate reinforcements. Thexer pulled up the tactical view of the 7th Fleet's position and felt his blood run cold. The humans had created a kill zone. Imperial ships attempting to maneuver away from attackers were being funneled into overlapping fields of fire from multiple directions. It was a textbook envelopment tactic, executed with perfect timing. 7th Fleet, disengage and withdraw to Rally Point Delta. We can't withdraw, sir. They're blocking our escape vectors. On the tactical display, the 7th Fleet symbol began blinking red. Ship after ship went offline. Thexer could only watch as an entire fleet group was systematically dismantled. Then Commander Chen's voice filled the communication channels. Imperial forces, this is Commander Chen. You are losing this battle. Your command structure is collapsing. Your defensive positions are compromised. I am offering you one final chance to surrender. Stand down your weapons, and your crews will not be harmed. Ignore that transmission, Stun ordered. All forces, continue the attack. We will not surrender to inferior numbers. But the truth was becoming obvious to everyone watching. The numbers didn't matter. The humans were fighting a completely different kind of war, one the Imperium had no doctrine for, no training for, no understanding of. Thexer made a decision. Communications, open a direct channel to Commander Chen. Admiral, what are you doing? Vexel demanded. I'm trying to save as many lives as I can. Chen's face appeared on his personal screen. Behind her, Thexer could see the calm, precise activity of a human bridge crew. No panic, no chaos, just disciplined professionals executing their roles with frightening efficiency. Admiral Thexer, Chen said, I was hoping you would call. Tell me how you're doing this, he said. How are you moving your ships so precisely? Skip drives, she replied. We don't travel through hyperspace like you do. We fold space, jumping from one point to another instantaneously. It requires enormous power and incredible computational precision. But it means we can position our ships anywhere we want, whenever we want. That should be impossible. So should a species surviving against an empire that outgunned them 1,000 to 1. Humans have a tendency to do impossible things when we're motivated. She paused. Commander, you're a smart man, Admiral. You know how this battle ends. The question is, how many more people die before we reach that ending? Vexer looked at his tactical display. Over 2,000 Imperial ships had been destroyed or disabled in the past hour. The humans had lost fewer than 30 ships, most of those due to bad timing rather than effective Imperial tactics. What are your terms? Unconditional surrender of all forces at Nexus Gate. Crews will be allowed to evacuate in life pods and small craft. Your warships will be seized as spoils of war. Prisoners will be treated according to the standards of military conduct. And if we refuse, then we'll continue this battle until your fleet is completely destroyed. I have reinforcements waiting to jump in. You don't. Your Emperor is currently stuck aboard a disabled Dreadstar with no working weapons and failing life support. He has perhaps 30 minutes before his crew starts suffocating. Dexter's eyes widened. He checked the status of Invincible Fury. Chen was right. The human charges hadn't just disabled weapons. They damaged the ship's environmental systems as well. You could just let him die. We could, Chen agreed. But that's not who we are. We're not here to commit genocide. We're here to win a war. Those are different things. A new transmission interrupted them. It was Thun, his image distorted by failing systems aboard his ship. Fleet Admiral Thexner, you will not negotiate with these creatures. You will fight to the last ship, the last crew member, the last. The transmission cut off as Invincible Fury's communication systems failed completely. Thexner looked at Commander Vexel. His second-in-command's face was rigid with anger and shame. Around them, the bridge crew waited for orders. Young officers who had never known defeat, now facing the destruction of everything they believed in. All Imperial forces, this is Fleet Admiral Thexner, he said. His voice was steady, though it cost him everything to keep it that way. I am ordering a general ceasefire. All ships are to power down weapons and shields. We are surrendering. The protests came immediately, dozens of commanders shouting objections, demanding he rescind the order. But Thexner held firm. I will not sacrifice thousands more lives for pride. The battle is lost. The war may be lost, but our people can survive. That's what matters now. Slowly, reluctantly, the Imperial ships began powering down. Weapons went offline. Shields collapsed. The human ships, which had been dancing through the battle like ghosts, took up positions around the disabled Imperial fleet. Commander Chen's voice filled the channels again. Imperial ships, launch your life pods. You will be directed to designated evacuation zones. Medical ships will treat your wounded. Search and rescue teams will recover survivors from damaged vessels. This battle is over. Vexner stood on his bridge as his crew began evacuation procedures. Vexel approached him, his face twisted with disgust. You have dishonored us all. The Imperium will remember this day. You will be marked as the admiral who surrendered the greatest fleet in galactic history. Perhaps, Dexter replied quietly, but those 60,000 crew members will live to see tomorrow. That matters more than my honor. He turned to Lyra. Make sure all junior personnel evacuate first, and transmit a message to Commander Chun. Tell her I request permission to remain aboard Righteous Vengeance until all crew have safely evacuated. Lyra nodded, and as she moved to carry out the order, Thexner took one last look at the tactical display. The Nexus Gate, the bottleneck that was supposed to save the Imperium, had become its greatest defeat. But Commander Chun had been right about one thing. This wasn't about genocide or destruction. The humans could have killed everyone in this system. Instead, they were taking prisoners, offering medical care, treating defeated enemies with dignity. Thexner had fought many species in his long career, but he'd never fought anyone quite like humans. They were warriors when they needed to be, but they were also something else, something that still respected honor even in victory. Perhaps, he thought as he watched Imperial life pods streaming toward human rescue ships, there was hope after all. Not for the Imperium as it had been, that empire was dying, but for something new, something different, maybe. 2 hours later, Dexter was the last Imperial officer to leave Righteous Vengeance. Human troops had boarded the ship to secure it, and they escorted him to a transport with surprising respect. As he was led away, he caught a glimpse of Commander Chan on a view screen, coordinating evacuation efforts with the same calm efficiency she had shown throughout the battle. She noticed him watching and gave a slight nod, neither mocking nor triumphant, just acknowledgement between two military professionals. The transport carried Thexner away from the battlefield toward a human-held station where prisoners were being processed. As they traveled, he overheard human soldiers talking. Did you hear? The assault fleet just jumped into Imperial core space. 3 systems simultaneously. The throne world is cut off. Think they'll surrender after what happened here? They'd be stupid not to. Thexner closed his eyes. The war wasn't over, but in his heart, he knew the outcome was no longer in doubt. The Imperium, the great empire that had ruled for 3,000 years, had been broken in a single day by an enemy they dismissed as primitive and irrelevant. History, he thought, had a cruel sense of irony. 3 months had passed since the Battle of Nexus Gate. Fleet Admiral Thexner stood in a small room on Station Concordia, a neutral space station floating between what used to be Imperial territory and what was now human-controlled space. The room had a single window looking out at the stars, and Thexner found himself staring through it often these days. The door opened behind him. He didn't turn around. "They're ready for you," said a human guard. The young man spoke in accented but understandable Imperial Common. Thexner had learned that humans had a gift for languages, adapting quickly to new forms of communication. Just another thing they were good at. The conference hall was enormous, with a circular table in the center. Around it sat representatives from dozens of species. Imperial governors who had survived the war, human military commanders, delegates from the Krell, the Vex, and half a dozen other species watching to see what kind of galaxy would emerge from the ashes of the old order. Grand Imperator Zahn sat on one side of the table, looking far older than he had 3 months ago. The defeat at Nexus Gate had been followed by the loss of 6 core worlds in rapid succession. The Imperial military, what remained of it, had fragmented into competing factions. Some wanted to continue fighting. Others had surrendered immediately. A few had simply disappeared, taking their ships to the frontier to become independent warlords. The Imperium as a unified government no longer existed. Commander Sarah Chun, now promoted to Admiral, sat across from Zahn. She looked tired but satisfied. Next to her were several other human commanders, including Admiral Marcus Webb, who had led the assault on the core worlds, and General Catherine Reeves, who commanded human ground forces. "Shall we begin?" asked the neutral moderator, a Vex diplomat named Counselor then. "We are here to formalize the end of hostilities between the Zephron Imperium and the United Human Systems." Zahn spoke first, his voice heavy with defeat. "The Imperium accepts responsibility for the aggression that led to this conflict. We acknowledge that our invasion of human colonial space was unprovoked and unjustified." Cost him visibly to say those words. For 3,000 years, the Imperium had never apologized to anyone. Admiral Chin responded in a measured tone. "The United Human Systems recognizes that many individuals within the Imperial government opposed the invasion and worked to prevent further violence. We do not hold the entire Imperial population responsible for the decisions of their leadership." The Ur seated behind the main delegation as a military advisor watched the proceedings carefully. This was unprecedented in the history he knew. Victorious powers typically imposed harsh terms on defeated enemies. Entire species had been subjugated or enslaved after losing wars to the Imperium. But the humans were doing something different. "Let us discuss the terms," Counselor Thren said. "The human delegation has provided a preliminary framework." Admiral Chen activated a holographic display that showed a map of known space. "Our terms are as follows. First, the Zephron Imperium will recognize the independence and sovereignty of the United Human Systems. All territorial claims on human worlds are permanently voided." No one objected. The Imperium no longer had the power to enforce those claims anyway. Second, the Imperium will pay reparations to human worlds damaged during the war. The payment schedule will be structured over 50 years to avoid economic collapse. Zahn nodded slowly. "We can agree to this." Third, the Imperium will reduce its military to a defensive force appropriate for internal security. No offensive fleet operations beyond Imperial borders will be permitted for a period of 25 years. This caused some murmuring among the Imperial delegates, but Stun raised a hand for silence. Fourth, all species currently classified as vassals or client states of the Imperium will be given the option of independence. Those who choose to remain part of the Imperial governance structure must do so voluntarily, with human observers present to ensure the choice is genuine. This was the point where the Ur had expected the most resistance. The Imperium had controlled dozens of species, some for over 1,000 years. Losing them would mean losing most of the Imperial economy and population base. But Stun simply closed his eyes and nodded. Admiral Chun continued, "Finally, and most importantly, humanity proposes the establishment of a Galactic Coalition Council. This council would consist of representatives from all major species and governments. It would serve as a forum for resolving disputes peacefully and coordinating responses to threats that affect multiple species." She paused, letting that sink in. Humanity will not be the sole authority in this new council. The Zephron Imperium will have an equal voice. So will the Krell, the Vex, and any other species that wishes to participate. The room was silent. This was unexpected. Everyone had assumed the humans would simply replace the Imperium as the new dominant power. Instead, they were proposing something that had never existed in known history. A truly collaborative government spanning multiple species. One of the Imperial governors, a female named Shendra, spoke up. Why? You won. You could impose any terms you wanted. You could rule the galaxy as the Imperium did. Why offer us equality? Admiral Chun looked at her thoughtfully. Because ruling through force and fear doesn't create stability. It creates resentment and eventual rebellion. We learned that lesson on our own world thousands of years ago. She gestured to the star map. Look at human history. We fought ourselves for millennia, nation against nation, ideology against ideology. We nearly destroyed our own world multiple times. But eventually, we learned that cooperation achieves more than conquest. Yes, it's harder. Yes, it requires compromise. But it works. Admiral Webb added, we're not naive. We know the Imperium won't trust us immediately. We know some Imperial military officers still dream of revenge. But we also know that most people, regardless of species, just want peace and prosperity. We can only achieve it by building something new together. The Ur found himself speaking without quite meaning to. And if the Imperium rebuilds its military and attacks you again in 25 years? All eyes turned to him. Chun smiled slightly. Then we'll defeat you again, Admiral. But honestly, I don't think that will happen. Because over the next 25 years, humans and Zephrons will be trading together, working together, learning from each other. It's hard to hate someone you do business with. It's hard to kill someone whose child plays with yours. You're talking about integration, Zahn said slowly. Not conquest, but assimilation through peaceful means. I prefer to call it cooperation, Chen replied. But yes, essentially. The negotiations continued for hours. Minor details were debated, compromises were reached, language was refined, but the basic framework held. By the end of the day, the preliminary peace treaty had been drafted and signed. As the delegates filed out, the Ur found himself walking beside Admiral Chun. They moved in silence for a moment before she spoke. I've been meaning to thank you, Admiral. Your decision to surrender at Nexus Gate saved thousands of lives on both sides. It also ended my career and destroyed my reputation. I know, Chin said quietly. For what it's worth, I think you made the right choice. The brave choice. The brave choice would have been to fight to the death. Chun shook her head. No, that would have been the easy choice. Following orders, living up to expectations, dying with honor, those things are simple. Choosing to survive in disgrace because it saves others. That's the hard choice. That's real courage. The Ur considered this. You studied Imperial tactics before the war. You knew how we thought, how we would react. We studied everything about you, your culture, your military history, your economic systems. We spent years preparing while we dismissed you as primitives. Yes, Chin said. That was your mistake, but also our advantage. You underestimated us because you didn't understand us. But we understood you very well. They reached a junction in the corridor. Chun extended her hand in the human gesture of greeting. I've been authorized to offer you a position, Admiral. We're establishing a joint human-imperial military academy. We need someone who understands both imperial doctrine and has the wisdom to teach the next generation about the costs of war. Would you be interested? Thexner stared at her outstretched hand. A human gesture offering partnership a year ago. He would have been insulted. Now he slowly reached out and grasped her hand. I would be honored. Good. We start in 3 months. And Admiral, bring that sensor technician, Lyra, with you. She has a good analytical mind. We can use people like her. As Chun walked away, Thexner stood alone in the corridor, thinking about the future. The Imperium he had served no longer existed, but perhaps something better could take its place. 5 years passed. Thexner stood in the lecture hall of the Coalition Military Academy, looking out at a class of young officers. Half were human, a quarter were Zephron, and the rest were from a dozen other species. They wore mixed uniforms, a blend of human and imperial design elements, symbolizing the new unified military structure. Today, we're studying the Battle of Nexus Gate, Thexner announced. This battle changed the course of galactic history. It demonstrated the importance of adaptability, the danger of arrogance, and the power of unconventional tactics. I should know. I was there. The students leaned forward, attentive. Many of them hadn't been born when the war happened. For them, it was history, not lived experience. Thexner activated a tactical display showing the battle's opening moments. The Imperium made several critical mistakes. First, we assumed that numerical superiority would guarantee victory. Second, we fought according to doctrine that was centuries old. Third, and most importantly, we failed to understand our enemy. A young Zephron student raised her hand. Professor, some historians say the war was inevitable, that humans and the Imperium were bound to clash eventually. Do you agree? No, Thexner said firmly. Nothing is inevitable. The war happened because we chose aggression over diplomacy. We could have negotiated with the humans, established trade agreements, recognized their sovereignty. Instead, we attacked their colonies because we believed they were too weak to resist. We created our own enemy. A human student spoke up. But Professor, humans won the war. Doesn't that make the outcome good? War is never good, Thexner replied. Yes, the war led to the coalition, which has brought unprecedented peace and prosperity. But it came at the cost of millions of lives, imperial, human, and others caught in the crossfire. Every one of those people had families, dreams, futures. War destroyed all of that. We study this battle not to glorify what happened, but to ensure it never happens again. The lesson continued. As Thexner walked the students through the tactics and strategies employed by both sides, he couldn't help but reflect on how much had changed. Lyra now served as the Academy's Chief of Strategic Studies. Former Imperial officers worked alongside human commanders in the Coalition Defense Force. Trade between human and Imperial worlds had increased exponentially. New technologies were being developed through collaboration. Mixed-species crews operated ships that protected the entire coalition. Most importantly, a new generation was growing up without the old prejudices. Young humans and Zephron attended schools together, played together, and would eventually build the future together. After the class ended, Thexner walked through the academy grounds. He passed training fields where humans and Zephron practiced combat exercises together. He saw a group of students from multiple species working on an engineering project, their different perspectives creating solutions neither could have developed alone. A familiar figure approached. Admiral Chun, now serving as the Coalition's Chief of Military Operations, fell into step beside him. Good lecture today, she said. I was observing from the back. You should be teaching these classes yourself. You were the architect of the victory, and you were the one who had the wisdom to prevent unnecessary slaughter. We both have things to teach them. They walked in companionable silence for a moment. We received a distress call this morning, Chen said. A colony in the outer reaches is under attack by pirates, mixed human and imperial population. The Coalition Council approved a response. Captain Toval is leading the mission. He was one of your former officers, wasn't he? Thexner nodded. A good commander. He'll handle it well. He requested human ships to accompany his task force. Chun added. Specifically asked for the destroyer Resolute. Said he'd served with her captain during joint exercises and trusted his judgment. Cooperation in practice, not just theory. Exactly. They reached the observation deck overlooking the Academy's main plaza. Below, hundreds of students from dozens of species moved between classes, ate together in the cafeteria, and studied in mixed groups. Do you ever regret it? Chun asked quietly. The surrender? Choosing to live with dishonor rather than die as a hero. Thexner thought about that question. No, he said finally. I saved lives that day. Some of those people I saved are down there now teaching the next generation. Their children are studying here. If I had fought to the death at Nexus Gate, none of that would exist. Sometimes the greatest courage is choosing to live with your decisions, even when they cost you everything you thought mattered. Chin nodded. For what it's worth, humans see you as a hero. The admiral who had the wisdom to end a pointless battle. We tell your story in academies too. And in imperial space, opinions are mixed, but they're changing. Time, Thexner said. That was what they had now. Time to heal. Time to build. Time to create something better than what had come before. A young human student approached nervously. "Excuse me, Professor Thexner. Could I ask you a question?" "Of course. I'm writing a paper on the war. My thesis is that humanity's victory proved that we're superior to the Imperium. Do you agree?" Thexner looked at the young human seriously. "No, I do not agree. Humans weren't superior. You were different. You had developed different technologies, different tactics, different philosophies. In the context of that specific war, those differences gave you advantages. But the Imperium had strengths of its own. 3,000 years of institutional knowledge, incredible manufacturing capacity, diverse populations with unique talents." He gestured around them. "What makes the coalition stronger than either the Imperium or humanity alone is that we've combined those strengths. Human innovation with imperial institutional memory. Human adaptability with imperial stability. That's the real lesson. Diversity isn't a weakness. It's the foundation of true power." The student thanked him and hurried away. Chin smiled. "You're good at this teaching thing. I had good examples. Commanders who taught me that true leadership isn't about dominance, but about bringing out the best in those you lead." They stood together, watching the sun set over the academy grounds. In the distance, ships could be seen launching, coalition vessels on patrol, keeping the peace that had been so hard won. 50 years passed before Thexner died peacefully in his sleep at the age of 412. By then, the coalition encompassed over 900 systems. Wars still happened, but they were smaller, contained, resolved through negotiation as often as force. Humans and Zephron no longer saw each other as enemies, but as partners. Mixed marriages were common. Half-human, half-Zephron children attended schools throughout coalition space, their very existence a symbol of how much had changed. The story of the war became history, then legend, then simply the foundation upon which a new civilization was built. Children learned about the Battle of Nexus Gate the way earlier generations had learned about ancient conflicts, a cautionary tale about the costs of pride and the value of wisdom. And throughout the galaxy, on ships of every design, crews of every species worked together, exploring the unknown regions of space. Not as conquerors, but as pioneers. Not as enemies, but as partners. The galaxy had learned a hard lesson. Humanity didn't want to rule. They just refused to kneel.